All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Learn One New Thing podcast webinar. My name is Sydney Baxter, and I'm a training specialist here at the Ag Leader Academy. And I'll be walking you through today's Learn One New Thing webinar series, where we hope you learn one new thing about our data management platforms, both SMS and AgFiniti. I'll begin sharing my screen here, and this week's topic is primarily about our SMS Advanced license and the advanced harvest analysis tools you can use with the license. So while the webinar series has covered AgFiniti in the past and the basic SMS license account, today's will primarily be focused on SMS Advanced. So as I always mention at the beginning, I want to tell you what you're looking at. Right now you're looking at my screen. I'm sharing my SMS where I have an advanced license. So if mine looks slightly different from yours, know that I'm running with an advanced license and you can follow along with me if you also have the advanced license. Also, before I get started, I do want to remind you that this webinar is recorded and will be uploaded to the Learn One New Thing playlist on YouTube, where you can go back and reference it at any time or share it with a friend if you find it valuable. All right, let's get started with the content. So I kind of teased you with this the last time whenever we were going over basic harvest analysis in September, but with October being here, harvest is come and gone for many of you, and we just thought this was a seasonally appropriate topic to begin talking about our harvest analysis. So I'll be working primarily in the analysis wizard today at the top of the toolbar, which you can see highlighted by my cursor here, and we're going to go through some of the advanced harvest analysis tools you can use. I'll begin in my project and select the analysis wizard here. And the first analysis that I want to go over is yield analysis. So this is probably the most basic and bare bones analysis tool within the analysis wizard, but it doesn't get the credit that it deserves because it's super easy to use. So yield analysis works for multiple years worth of data for a single crop type. So a reason or a use case that I might use this yield analysis is if I have a grower that I'm wanting to look at his corn data for the last 10 years, let's say, and see how it has progressively yielded more and more over time. I can use the yield analysis tool to look back 10 years, sort through the years, and identify which years we planted corn, and then aggregate those results into a single yield analysis where I can begin looking at how it averaged throughout the years. Like I said, with yield analysis, it's super easy to set up, meaning there's actually no setup at all. So if you look where I'm highlighting with my cursor, notice all the buttons are grayed out. If you've worked with SMS Advanced or you've worked in the analysis wizard, you know that most of the functions within the analysis wizard you have to build. However, with the yield analysis, there's absolutely no setup required. All you do is select yield analysis and choose the field you want to run it on. So I'll show you how we walk through the yield analysis by selecting yield analysis and choosing single field here. I'll select the grower, farm, and field that I would like to begin analyzing. So again, if you've been hanging out with me on this webinar for the last few months, you know that East McBain's is our favorite field at the Academy, simply because we have several years worth of data. And I'm going to filter my year to 2022. Now, you might have heard me say, well, I thought we could use this for multiple years. Why are we filtering it down a year? That's simply to filter out the product that we're going to use. So whenever I filter to 22, notice how I get corn as the only product in my drop-down list. If I were to leave this on the most recent year, 23 data, then the only option I would have is soybean data because that's what was planted in 23. So I'll filter back to 22 here, continue with grain harvest as the operation and corn as my product, and choose next at the bottom. SMS is going to give me the sanity check. Hey, are you sure you want to use this in your yield analysis? Yes, I do. So I'll choose next. And then SMS is going to ask me, what do you want included in this yield analysis? As I mentioned in my example, maybe I want to look back 10 years. SMS does recommend that you do at least 3 years worth of data. And the reason that it defaults to 3 years, but 8, where we can toggle up or down, is because we understand that most growers in the Midwest are on a crop rotation. And although you might have 8 years worth of data, is that truly 8 years worth of corn harvest data? Probably not. If we're planting every other year, we're planting corn, let's say, then that's maybe 4 years worth of corn harvest data. So it does add this note to include at least 3 years of that crop data if you want to begin analyzing it. I'll skip over the grid settings. If you wanted to change them for any reason, you could uncheck the boxes and begin modifying how we're interpolating the data. And I will choose finish at the bottom. Like I said, it's super simple in the way that that's all you have to do in order to get a yield analysis for the East McMains field. What it did was looked in the background, checked through the last 8 years worth of data, aggregated those results into this single map that you see here in our analysis editor. What it did was come up with our new attributes, which if you choose the drop down from the max yield or from max yield, you can see all the new attributes that are included in this yield analysis operation. So we see some pretty good attributes like this max yield, how high did it yield in all the years past, or what products yielded the most over the last 8 years. Before I go into each individual attribute or some attributes I should highlight, I'm just going to go ahead and save and close this. That way I save it to my management tree. When I choose save, it's going to prompt me, how do you want to save this in your management tree? And it filters grower farm field. The only thing you need to enter is the product. And for this, like I said, it was a single product. So I'll choose corn and then choose accept. Now, once I choose accept, it's going to take me back to my blank project here, where I can then open Grower Smith, Home, East McMains, and now I have a new year, 2024. In that 2024 year, I see I have my yield analysis that I can create a new map of. Now, if you've been watching the webinar series over the last few months, you might notice that this map looks slightly different from the other maps we've seen. It's not the green, yellow, red color scheme that we're used to. That's because our attribute is now on yield growth, which comes with a different legend. Right now, it's showing us over the last 8 years, based on the data that we aggregated, how much did you improve or how much did you decline in your yield, and in what areas of the field is how it's color coding that legend. I mentioned there were several other attributes that come through, and we can see those in the drop down here. Some that are noteworthy might be max yield or minimum yield if you're trying to predict your bushels an acre off this field. You might also want to look at your highest yielding product. You know, maybe one hybrid did really well and you wanted to see how it compared to the other hybrids planted in the last 8 years. You could do so by changing the attribute to be the highest yielding product, and it will display here. Same for highest yielding year. You know, a lot of growers this year are saying this might be my best year for corn, which of course it is because grain prices are so low this year and everybody's got good corn, but they want to see how it measured to their best year. So they're looking back here using this yield analysis for the last 8 years worth of corn harvest data, and they're saying, which year did I do the best? All right, so in this example, 2016 was the best year of yield in this field. We can see how it shakes out this year. That was the first part of today's webinar over yield analysis. I'd invite you now, if you have any questions, please drop those in the chat. Did forget to mention that at the beginning of this webinar. If you have any questions at any point in time, please drop them in the chat and we'll get them addressed as soon as possible or at the end of class. I'll give you a moment to begin typing your questions as I close out of all my maps and collapse my management tree to start fresh for our next topic here. So the next item I want to cover with you all is the comparison or multi-year average analysis tool within the analysis wizard. So if I go back to the analysis wizard in the main toolbar here, and I scroll through my list to find multi-year average analysis, you'll notice immediately that it looks slightly different than the yield analysis. For one, we have these functions set up. But for two, if you were to read the description down in the lower right-hand or left-hand corner, you would notice that multi-year average analysis is for 2 crop types. So we're not limited to one like we were with the yield analysis. Now, of course, since we can add in new features like putting multiple crops in there, we do have to do some background work like adding our new functions in. With the customer training project that I'm currently using, notice I have 2 functions that are already built in here. I'm going to walk through how you build one by choosing to edit one of these functions. I'll choose edit once I have one highlighted, and you'll notice this is going to be the same wizard that you walk through if you were to choose add. So you begin creating your function by naming it and giving it a description. We'll choose next, and then you filter the data that you would like to use for this multi-year average analysis. So what field are we averaging? We're going to be averaging Grower Smith, Home, East McMains. and we'll choose next at the bottom here. SMS, again, is going to give us a sanity check. You want us to include all of these years for you to average, and we sure do. So we'll choose next at the bottom. Now we'll be adding attributes over that we want included within our multi-year average analysis. So for this example, the way this function was built was only to include yield. If you wanted more, like moisture or the speed in which you are traveling as you are harvesting, you could certainly add those over by highlighting and choosing add. One thing I want to call out on this screen is the ability to normalize your data, both against the data mean or on a 0 to 100% scale. Now, if you notice what this multi-year average analysis was titled at the beginning, it was for corn only. So if we were to filter it to corn only, we would get the same results that we got for our yield analysis. I want to point out here, though, if you're using multi-year average analysis for a single crop type, the most appropriate selection to choose from this dropdown is going to be normalizing against the data mean. I'll show you what it looks like when we choose the normalizing from a 0 to 100% scale whenever we include soybeans in our multi-year average analysis. I'll choose next at the bottom here and finish. And then I'm going to show you the difference between the corn and soybean example. So we just walked through how to build the function for just corn. I'll show you how to edit the function for corn and soybeans. So here we got a name and a description. We filtered it down. Notice that there's no product selected here. Previously, corn was selected. We'll choose next, and we will choose next again, where we'll get to the attribute screen. And notice our normalizing is on a 0 to 100% scale instead of our against the data mean. That's because we're using two crop types. So if we were to measure the average bushel per acre for soybeans, it would be very different from the average bushel per acre with corn. If we're doing this 0 to 100% scale, we're putting our very worst bushels an acre yield on the 0, and we're putting our very best on 100. And when we normalize that, we can get a map that looks a little bit cleaner as we begin to aggregate these results. I'm going to cancel out of here, and I'll run this normalized yield for a single field. I'll select the East McMains field, grain harvest data, and choose next. That'll be the field I'm running it on. Choose finish here. And it's going to look back at all the years worth of data that I have included in my management tree for Grower Smith, East McMains, which is about 20 years. And it's going to look at grain harvest data for both corn and soybeans, put it on a 0 to 100% scale, and create a map that looks like so. Now, whenever you get your results, you'll notice you have there's much fewer attributes in the dropdown. You have your coefficient of variation normalized yield, as well as regular normalized yield. Now, whenever I save and close, I'll need to select a product, which remember, this is corn and soybeans. So we can either create a new product or we can select no product, choose accept, and it's going to close out of it for us, where we can begin opening it and viewing it in map view. So this is going to be under 2024 analysis results, multi-year averages data set. Now, one thing you might immediately notice, and this trips a lot of students up, is that this is a green polygon that's showing us no data at all. What happened to my normalized yield? If we look at our attributes over here on the right-hand side, we can see that this filter is on all attributes. We need to switch it back to our normalized yield in order to see the data that we would like to see. If this is going to catch you up every single time you come back and look at this analysis result, I would highly encourage you to save this as the operation default. That way, anytime you save this as a multi-year average analysis, anytime you open that up, it's going to appear with the normalized yield. How do we do that? How do we save it as the operation default? Simply right-click on the map that you want to see and save. Choose Edit Layer Options. Select Save Layer Settings, and choose to save it as the current operation default. And when we choose OK again, I'll close out of my map, collapse my management tree, click off of it, and now whenever I click back on Grower Smith, Home, East McMains 24 analysis results, I come back to a map that's no longer a green polygon, but saved as the normalized yield. That way, every time I open this map, it will appear this way. And you can do that for any operation. If you're modifying your legends, maybe to have fewer ranges or something else, you can always modify your legend and save it as the operation default using the same process. If you have any questions now, I invite you to drop those in the chat over our multi-year average analysis tool. Remember, a yield analysis is a single crop type, whereas a multi-year average analysis is multiple crop types. So that's the difference between the two as you're working through your harvest data this year. As I close my map and collapse my management tree, I will wait for any questions to come in. And then I'll get us started on the comparison analysis. We'll find the comparison analysis in the same window that we found all the other analysis tools. So go to the analysis wizard in the main toolbar, and we will scroll to where we find comparison analysis. Now, just as it sounds, a comparison analysis is simply comparing two attributes. Notice in my customer training project sample data that I'm using, we have several different functions available for you to run if you're working with customer training project data. If you've been through class before, you would have gotten that as a participant. Under the comparison analysis, I'll show you how these functions were built. Notice the name of them is comparing one attribute to another. We'll go through the one on yield by hybrid. I'll choose edit here, and notice the first thing we had to do was give it a name and a description. Whenever I choose next, here's what snags a lot of people in class is choosing your input data set versus your comparison data set. The way we've been describing it is what is our independent variable versus our dependent variable. Our input data set is going to be our dependent variable. What are we comparing it to? Versus the comparison attribute, what is being manipulated in order to create this dependent variable? So in this example, our comparison attribute is our independent variable, which is going to be planting data that contains our hybrid, which will then manipulate our dependent variable, grain harvest data. I simply selected those different operations by choosing to edit and then filtering down to the operation that I wanted to use. And the same is true for our comparison attribute. I'm going to cancel, or I'll choose next. Here's where I will begin adding the attributes over that I want to compare. So in this example, we have our yield and moisture added. Now, if we wanted to see any other attributes from our grain harvest data, we would simply select them. Maybe we wanted to compare our yield, wet weight, choose that and choose add, and that would add it over. And if I selected anything I didn't want to include, I could choose remove. Choose next at the bottom whenever we have our attributes from grain harvest data selected. And then it's going to ask us what would you like to compare to this grain harvest data? Yield by what? In this example, we have it built for yield by hybrid. So what we did was select the operation or select the comparison data set that we'd like to pull attributes from. For our attribute, it actually was a property because it's the attribute, or it's the hybrid name. So we would have selected select property, chose product, and then selected the name to add over, which is how we got this planting product name. Once we choose finish, we'll be selected to the data set we would like to reference. This is for multiple years that you're using, so this setup is a little bit different than if you're adding a brand new function. I'll choose finish, and then I'll run this for a single field. So we're comparing yield by hybrid based on the 22 grain harvest data. We'll choose next at the bottom here and finish. And unlike the other two analysis wizard tools we used, the comparison analysis tool is going to generate a report. So here we see our report where I'm going to zoom in a little so we can all see it just a little bit better. We can see we have our product name listed on the left here and how it yielded in the field, along with all these other attributes about the product and how it yielded in the field. A couple things to note about this report. We get questions in class, how in the world do I make it bigger? I just zoomed in for you all. How do we do that? We simply hold the control key on the keyboard and use the scroll wheel on the mouse to make it bigger or smaller. The way that you see it on your computer screen here is going to be the way that it's going to print. If you wanted to print it, you could go up to the main toolbar and choose print, or right click and select print there as well. If you wanted to make any modifications to this comparison report, you could do so by right-clicking, choosing Edit Report Options, And here you can begin determining how the report looks cosmetically, right? You can modify the logo that's on there as well as the title, but then you can also start taking out attributes if there's things you don't want to see. I'll move this over here. Maybe I don't care to see total moisture. That's not helpful to me. Same for min and max moisture. I can begin removing it by going back to my column selection tab here and choosing min moisture and selecting remove. Oh, sorry. In my selected items window here, that's where I'll begin removing that. So remove min and max moisture, and I will remove the total moisture. I believe I took my yield out, so I think I want to add yield back, my average yield. And if I wanted to make any modifications to what is ordered in which order, I can use the up and down arrows or click and drag this to be at the top. Maybe I want my area to also be pretty close to my yield and hybrid. Can do that there. Once I choose OK, SMS is going to modify those different column selection edits we made, and then we'll have a report that looks similar to the one you see here. I'll give you a moment if you have any questions about comparison report to drop those in the chat now. Looks like the Kevins are going back and forth in the chat box. Anyone else has any questions, I would invite you to drop those in there now over the 3 different analysis functions we used. I hope these serve you well during hopefully things are slowing down after harvest season is up. As I close out of today's SMS class, I do want to show you the survey. That way you can take it. I always appreciate your feedback. I try to incorporate it the best I know how. So if you're recommending, I don't know what's happening here. So if you're recommending new topics, that is great for me as I move forward, or as we move forward with the Learn One New Thing. My survey is not working for me, so let me try something else here. All right, you can scan this QR code to take the Learn One New Thing survey. I hope you learned one new thing today about our data management platform, SMS, with the SMS Advanced license. There's a 30-day free trial if you ever wanted to try it out. So I would encourage you to use that. And thanks for joining me this morning for the Learn One New Thing webinar. Again, it's recorded and uploaded to the YouTube playlist. So if you found it helpful at any point in time, you can go back and rewatch. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day. Zach, good question. I see that in the chat now. I'm going to exit out of the QR code we see here. So you mentioned, can we save those report attributes displayed? Think if you go into your report and how it was built. So analysis wizard, comparison report, and you edited the items in that report. Next. To my knowledge, I don't believe you can save those reports. So yeah, I don't think you can save the report attributes. I think you'd have to modify those every time you wanted to use it. Good question. All right, I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream. Again, thanks and have a good day.